I am live. It's a beautiful Thursday afternoon in Rocky River, Ohio, and throughout Northeast Ohio. It's a beautiful day. Yeah, it's still a little cold, but you know what? It's early March. It's not bad. It's sunny and 45 degrees. I'll sign for that. I know we had some 70 degrees earlier this week. Welcome on into the latest live edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull. When I was on 2 weeks with you live, I announced that we'll be moving the show to 2 o'clock. We're going to keep promoting that and getting everybody to join. Please spread the word. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button and join me, as thousands have already. Every week, every Thursday at 2 p.m. is our new time. We've moved up from 6 to 2. And for those of you who have been following me since I moved to Cleveland in August of 2011, then listening to me at 2 o'clock may be very familiar to you. I spent, let's see, how many years was it? 11 years broadcasting to you and screaming live at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So join me again every Thursday at 2 p.m. Lot to get to today. A little bit on the Cavaliers and the Guardians later, but free agency is right around the corner in the NFL. So a lot to get there. All of this brought to you by Bet Rivers. Check out the Bet Rivers website. Check out the Bet Rivers app. In fact, I was just looking on the website for the updated odds of where the Cavaliers are at Bet Rivers in terms of odds of winning the Eastern Conference. The Cavs had been fourth for much of the year, but they've actually dropped into a tie for fifth. Right now, the Celtics are minus 110, the Bucks plus 300, the Knicks plus 800. The Heat have moved ahead of the Cavs at plus 1,000, and the Cavs are tied with the Sixers at plus 1,200 to win the Eastern Conference, despite the win over Boston. They obviously haven't played great the last couple of weeks. More on the Cavaliers later. If you want to reach me, you can send me a tweet. You can send me a message in the chat room, or you can join me live on the air. At about 5 minutes ago, I put out a tweet with a link for you to join me live. And so all you have to do is click on that link, and when I see when people come up there, I'll punch you in, and then we'll be good to go. So if you want to join me live on the show, click on that link. You got to have Google Chrome or use the app, the Riverside app. But if you have Google Chrome, you're good to go. And so, like I said, I'll get to some callers later. And again, you can throw your questions in the chat. I got the chat up, and I will answer some questions coming up. It's a new time, so maybe a lot of you that have been joining me every week, maybe not everybody's here yet, but we'll keep getting the word out and hopefully get a bunch of people to join me. Here we go. All right, I want to start with free agency right around the corner. There's been a lot of buzz this week about Joe Flacco. And yesterday, Joe was on with one of the shows on Sirius XM NFL Radio. I can't remember what show it was. And there was a quote that caught like wildfire after that around Cleveland. The quote said that Joe Flacco's first choice is to play for the Browns. In fact, the day before, Mike Florio at Pro Football Talk reported that the Browns had spoken with Joe Flacco at the Combine and that there was mutual interest in a return. That combined with, again, the quote from Sirius XM that said Joe Flacco's top choice is the Browns had everybody abuzz, and the Flacco versus Watson wars continuing. But what's been missed in all the repeated tweets of that quote is context. I talk about context all the time on the podcast. I talk about context all the time on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. You got to have context. And in this case, when you see the quote, the Browns are my first choice, or my top choice, whatever it was, you have to have the context of the rest of the sentence. It's very important. And why everybody's leaving that out, I have no idea. What Joe Flacco said in this interview, if you go and actually listen to it, is all things being equal, the Browns would be my top choice. Well, that makes sense, right? All things being equal. But what he means and what he clarified later in the interview is he wants to start. Now, is there a team that's willing to give Joe Flacco the opportunity to at least compete to start this year? Maybe. Are the Browns one of those teams? They are not. Deshaun Watson, if he's healthy, and that might be a big if because he's coming off a shoulder injury that we really have no history of in the league. But he's supposed to start throwing any time now, sometime this month. So I would assume if he's able to throw in March, he'll be able to play by September. 6 months. If he's able to throw now, I would assume he's going to be good to go. So assuming Deshaun Watson is healthy to start the season, there is no competition. Deshaun Watson will be the starter. End of conversation. There's no argument. You could say, oh, Flacco played better at the end of last year. I agree. He's still not going to start. So there may be other teams where Joe could potentially start. Is there going to be a team that says, Joe, you're 100% our starter at the beginning of the year? No, there's no chance. Joe's 39. He didn't play much last year. Outside of his run last year, he hadn't played particularly well the last couple of years. He's still got a big-time arm, and he may still have starts in him. He obviously played well here for the most part last year. But nobody's handing him a starting job. Are there a couple places he could compete? As I said, yeah, sure. If it's any team that drafts a rookie in the first round and may not want to start that guy right away, that's a possibility. Does there end up being a team that doesn't get Justin Fields and doesn't get Kirk Cousins and doesn't get Baker Mayfield and doesn't get Gardner Minshew and doesn't get a guy in the first round, and there ends up being one or two teams that really don't have an answer at quarterback? That's possible too. And in those situations, Flacco might potentially compete for a starting job. If that doesn't happen, and then all things are equal, if it comes down to the only thing Joe is being offered is backup quarterback opportunities, then yes, in that situation, assuming the Browns were interested, which as we talked about in the last podcast, and as we talked about in UCSS, yes, I think the Browns would still be interested, and I think a reunion would make sense. But he made it very clear that he wants to start. And so when he says, yeah, the Browns are the top choice, yes, he loved it here. The fans were great to him. We all loved him. We all caught Flacco fever last year. Well, not all of us, but many of us, including myself. And he was great. Fans embraced him. He loved it. He had a great time. And of course, all things being equal, he'd love to come back. If the Browns said to Joe Flacco, Joe, you're our starting quarterback next year, I 100% believe he'd be the starter, but no chance that's going to happen. At least not now. As long as Deshaun Watson continues to trend physically in the right direction. So take that quote with a grain of salt, please. It's, the idea that he's going to be back, yes, he could, but certainly the first option for Joe Flacco is to be a starter. But if it came down to a choice of backup spots, I'm sure the Browns would be his first choice. That I believe. All right, again, if you want to jump in with me, you can go live on the air. I will click in. You will see your face in the podcast. In just a couple of minutes, we'll get to anybody who wants to jump in. You could tweet at me with a question. And, of course, you can join me in the chat room as well and ask any questions you may have or make any comments that you have there. All right, let's see where we got going right now. Adolfo says he's watching from Mexico City. Hello, Adolfo in Mexico City. Wow, I like it. How do you think the division rankings are right now? It's funny that you asked that because I was just talking about that earlier today. The AFC North is loaded. We know it was good last year, and that was with significant injuries to both Joe Burrow and Deshaun Watson and to the Steelers' quarterback mess. And still, every team finished over 500 in the AFC North. Right now, today, with the information we have, with the rosters we currently have, I would say Ravens 1, Bengals 2, Browns 3, Steelers 4. But really, it could end up in any order. Now, at the moment, the Steelers have the worst quarterback situation. And so I would put them last. But if they got Russell Wilson, there were reports today that there's mutual interest between Russell Wilson and the Steelers. And while I don't love Russell Wilson, he's still a big upgrade over the noners they have playing quarterback there. Mason Rudolph stinks. Kenny Pickett stinks. Everybody loved Kenny Pickett. I thought the guy stunk coming out of college. Never thought he was any good. So far, it looks like I'm right on that. I've certainly been wrong on plenty of things, but so far, looks right. So that would be my order, Adolfo, as of right now. Would be Ravens, Bengals, Browns, Steelers. But I think it's really, really close between them all. KW Outdoors says he tweeted me a question. KW, I don't see your question, man. I'm looking at Twitter. I'm looking at my mentions. Did you not tag me? I don't know. You got to tag me if you want me to answer the question. Or did you just respond to the tweet I put out? Let me see if I can find your question. No, I don't have it. Sorry. Put it in the chat room here. Manuel Rodriguez. Hi, Bull. Watching from Colombia. So we got Mexico City and Colombia represented. Is it true that the Browns might play in Brazil? If they do, would you and the UCSS guys come down? It is true that the Browns could end up playing in Brazil. They have a 1 in 9 shot of playing in Brazil. But I doubt we would come down. I would love to. I've never been to Brazil. I would love to go to Brazil. I think it would be amazing if we could come down if the Browns were there. But I don't think we have the budget to send 10 guys and all this equipment to Brazil right now. So, the podcast and Bet Rivers will not, I could guess, will not be sending me to Brazil either. But if either Bet Rivers or Tegna are willing to send me to Brazil, I'm certainly willing to go. Brett sends the message. Question: what are some of your favorite restaurants you've tried during your vacation? The best, it was hit or miss. So I was on vacation in a town called Palm Harbor, which is just north of Clearwater and just northwest of Tampa. We flew into the Tampa airport. I'd say the best restaurant that I ate at was a Greek place called, I got to double check the name. I think it's Hella's. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's in a town called Tarpon Springs, which is just north of where I stayed. And apparently Tarpon Springs has a large Greek population. And the place, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it, if it's Hellas or Hellas, HELLA''S. It's a cool-looking place. And we went for dinner there. There's a big restaurant and then a bakery right next door. I'd say that was the best meal I had. I got the lamb chops. They were absolutely outstanding. My wife got, what's it called? Is it moussaka? I can't remember. It's like a Greek lasagna. I can't think of what it's called, but it was great. My son got a shrimp dish. We had some really great desserts. That was the best food. There's a little restaurant right in the Crystal Beach, Palm Harbor area called Emily's that I went for breakfast. That was really good. Went to another great breakfast joint in Clearwater. I'll have to look up the name. I can't think of it right now. And then I ran into a fan. Actually, at this Emily's restaurant, I ran into a fan, a guy who's been a big fan, moved down to Florida a few years ago. And I met him and his family, nice family. And they recommended a restaurant that I also went to for lunch called Lucky Lobster, I think it was called. I think that was it. And that was really good also. So I had some great food on vacation. It was really nice. I think, it's pronounced Hayas. There you go. It was great. It was absolutely great. All right, one other thing. Oh, not one other thing. I got plenty of other things I want to get to. Another thing on free agency when it comes to the Browns. Today, talking about an article earlier today that Mary Kay Cabot put out about the Browns potentially trading for Mike Williams. And ultimately, I don't have a problem. If the Browns want to trade for Mike Williams, I'm good with that. I mean, they're not going to have to they wouldn't have to give up much because he's a potential cap casualty. So I'm thinking at best a 5th round pick, but probably more of a 6th round pick, or maybe even like the Browns, the Chargers. At least this is what I think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm off here, but maybe it's Mike Williams and a seventh rounder Mike Williams and a seventh rounder for a fifth, or maybe for a sixth, or who knows. I don't think you're gonna have to give up that much because he's a big cap hit. He's 30. He's coming off a knee injury. Those are the reasons, though, I'm nervous about him. Ultimately, if healthy, and I question that because a knee injury like that, a torn ACL at 30, could be dicey. Or he's not 30 yet, but he's turning 30, I believe, in some point during the early in the season, I think. And he's had other injury issues in the past, so that makes me a little nervous. I certainly wouldn't give up anything of significance in a trade, but a late draft pick or a late draft swap, that's fine. I would rather target Marquise Brown or Calvin Ridley in free agency because I don't have to give up anything besides money. Jason Lloyd argued with me today that he thinks Mike Williams is better than both of those guys. I don't agree. Mike Williams at his best year was better than those guys, but those guys haven't played as long. Ridley missed 2 years due to suspension, and Marquise Brown's a younger player, and Marquise Brown has played with nobody, right? Let me correct that. He hasn't played with nobody because he played with Lamar Jackson earlier in his career, but at that point in Lamar Jackson's career, he outside of 1 year, he wasn't throwing the ball a ton. There's a lot more about the running. And now he's been in Arizona where they've had injury issues, and he hasn't played. It's been inconsistent teams and play in terms of his quarterback situation and the talent around him. And Marquise Brown, as I said, is just 26. So I still think there's a lot of upside when it comes to Marquise Brown. Yes, I would agree with Jason ultimately that Mike Williams' ceiling is probably higher than Marquise Brown, but I don't know that he can get back to his ceiling, where I think Marquise Brown still can. 4 years younger, 3 and change years younger, and not the injury history or as bad an injury history as Mike Williams. I think he'd be my first choice. A month ago, I think I had Ridley ahead of Brown, but now I'd go Brown 1, Ridley 2, Mike Williams 3, and I guess my fourth choice would probably be Gabe Davis. I'm not a big Gabe Davis guy. I mean, he was playing with, the second or third best quarterback in the league the last bunch of years, and he's been very inconsistent. So in terms of wide receiver, that would be the plan. Obviously, 0-5er. What's the matter? I'm upset. I'm having an audio problem. You got to log out and log back in there, 0-5er. Sorry. Didn't mean to ignore you. We'll try to figure it out. All right. So that's the wide receiver. That would be my wide receiver game plan. Will the Browns spend in free agency there? Who knows? At the moment, after the restructure of Denzel Ward, the Browns have about $7 million in available cap space between the reworking his contract and the big jump in the cap number, the 255.4, I think. The Browns can create more cap space by reworking Deshaun Watson's contract, reworking Myles Garrett's contract, possibly extending Amari Cooper and or Nick Chubb, and lowering their cap numbers. I would stay away from a redo of Deshaun Watson's contract. It's already a $64 million cap hit and a 72. If they push it off another year, it then goes to a $72 million cap hit the year after that. And then you're talking at the end of the contract, potentially $27 million over 2 years in dead cap, even if he makes it through the fifth year. Because he has barely played and not played particularly well through 2 seasons, then I think I would just let it sit. I would be looking to extend Amari Cooper and Nick Chubb both on the last years of the contract. Neither is guaranteed. We've talked about this a lot. If I'm the Browns, I extend both guys a year and lower the cap number. And I think between Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper, it's about $40 million on the cap this year. And they've got to get it way down on both those guys. Obviously, Nick Chubb, I think, has like a $16 million, $17 million cap hit. He's got $11 million and change coming to him. His salary for this year. They're not. Nobody loves Nick Chubb more than me. I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of you that love Nick Chubb just as much, if not more, than I do. I love the guy. But they're not paying him $11 million. Not with a ton of free agent running backs. The market's depressed to begin with. It's going to be even more saturated. He's coming off a serious injury, late 20s. The only you can't. Nobody's cutting Nick Chubb. You can't cut Nick Chubb. He's too important to the team. He's too special a player. He's too special to the culture and everything. In fact, I saw. It is Musaka. Yeah, Monzo. I know more about Greek food than I do about hockey. By the way, it was Musaka. Now I lost my train of thought. What the hell was I talking about there? I just right out of my head. What the heck was I just doing? I was talking wide receiver. Oh, running. That's right. The Nick Chubb extension. So I would think at this point, like I'm not cutting him, but he's not going to get a ton of money on the free agent market at this point, and hopefully they work it out to the point where the Browns will have Nick Chubb back for at least the next 2 years. We want Nick Chubb to retire as a Cleveland Brown. Nobody wants to see him leave. The Browns don't want to see him leave. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was watching a video earlier today where Didi Kinkabwala, my good friend from CBS, and of course she's a regular on our show, on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. She's been on this show during the football season. She at the Combine, she did an interview with Kevin Stefanski and asked some that kind of fun type of question. She asked Kevin Stefanski about what coach would win the 40-yard dash, so on and so forth. One of the questions she asked him was, if you had to pick one player on your team to babysit your kids, who would it be? And he, without thinking for a second, he said Nick Chubb. And not that means they can't cut him, because ultimately it's a business, and ultimately it may be out of Kevin Stefanski's hands. But Nick Chubb is everything that's right about football, everything that's right about life, everything that's right about the Cleveland Browns. And there hasn't been a lot right about the Cleveland Browns in recent years. But he is. He is the ultimate warrior, the ultimate teammate, the ultimate team guy. They got to find a way. And I think the fact that the market's so overloaded and depressed to begin with because running backs don't get paid will eventually lead to them figuring it out. I'd like to hope that it happens before free agency starts next week, so it's just out of the way. We'll see. And what they do with Amari Cooper will be interesting as well. He'll be back, obviously, not going to cut him, but they'd like to knock down his cap number, which is 23, 24 million for this year. It's huge. I think the way to do that is extend both guys. Now, are you comfortable giving guaranteed money to both these guys for a second year when they're kind of towards their limits, traditional age of the players of this caliber? I would, because I think Nick Chubb will bounce back once he gets healthy from the injury, because he's a special guy. And Amari Cooper was still great last year. He showed no signs of going off the cliff. Doesn't mean he couldn't quickly, but no signs of it at this point. So there you go. Let's see. Brett tweets, they have to redo Watson this year. You worry about the dead money later. I don't agree that they have to. It depends how much, you could redo Myles Garrett's contract, Nick Chubb, and Amari Cooper, and maybe have 25, 30, even 35 million in cap room. I don't know if they need more than that. I get, but in the end, the reason and they may end up redoing Watson's contract and taking the cap hit further down the road. The reason I'd be hesitant is because of how he's played the first 2 years, because he has not been good, and because he's been hurt. That I would want, before I keep kicking it down the road, I want to make sure, is he worth it? I know Myles Garrett is. I know Nick Chubb is. I know Amari Cooper is. I don't know right now. And I never thought I'd be saying that when the Browns traded for him, but right now I don't know. And there's no way anybody else could, because he hasn't played consistently at a high level in 4 years for 3 seasons. So that would make me hesitant, because if, and hopefully it won't be the case, but if things go bad again with him this year, the Browns next offseason have to start thinking about a plan B at the position. I know nobody wants to hear it. We all hope it doesn't happen, but absolutely it's going to be something the Browns will have to consider a year from now if next season does not go well for Deshaun Watson. And so if you kick the can down the road, you already got dead money after the contract. If you kick even more down the road, you better be sure that he's going to be, if he's great next year, fine. Then it's great because, I can keep kicking it down the road because I could keep him for another 5-10 years. But if next offseason you want to start moving on from him potentially, not that they would necessarily do it next offseason, but if it goes badly, they got to start thinking about it internally at the very least of what we're going to do. And so the more you kick it down the road with a guy that you're not sure about, the trickier things get. Ultimately, the Browns may do it, and certainly with his huge cap hit, they could create a ton of cap space. But I don't think it's a sure thing that they're going to do that. I think it's possible. I think if he had played really well the last 2 years or even last year, it would be likely. At this point, I would say it's certainly possible, but I don't think it's any kind of sure thing at all. Dontavius, no super chat. Just put something in the chat, and I will answer your question. I'll be very happy to answer your question. And again, if you want to jump in with me, I tweeted out a link about 30 minutes ago. I'll give you a chance to sneak in before the end of the show if you want to dive in with me here. All right. Some quickies on, and I'll talk more next week. Obviously, when free agency starts, we'll get more into some of the plans on defense. But really quick, the Browns are going to need to address the defensive line. You're potentially 4 guys of your top 7 or 8, probably 8 in free agency, especially at defensive tackle. You're going to need to bring in some new faces, including some veterans. I would think, they'll be doing some 1-year contracts again. But I do think you want to try to find that long-term solution to the opposite of Myles Garrett defensive end situation. It's been a situation where they've rotated guys. They've had some success. Obviously, Jadeveon Clowney in his first year here was good. Then he didn't have a good year. Darius Smith was okay last year. But you want to get a younger guy that could be the next up-and-comer. And you got, Ogbo Okoronkwo as the third defensive end, and he's a younger guy, and he's good. But he's not you need a legitimate number 2, and right now they don't have it. We'll get to some other things on the Browns, but quickly, 3 weeks from today, the Guardians will play their season opener on the road, of course. And the home opener is the day of the eclipse, which, of course, is a big deal. Apparently, Cleveland's going to be bonkers that day. That's what I'm hearing. There's going to be huge crowds all over the place. It's going to be absolutely nuts. But that's the home opener. But as for the Guardians, they haven't made any of the additions we've been looking for. But looking at the team and looking at this division, I do think it's possible the Guardians could win this division. But their pitching is going to have to be sensational. They're going to have to carry the team. And the offense is going to have to be serviceable. I'm not asking them to be great. It's got to be decent. It's got to be better. They're going to need some young guys to come through, both in the pitching staff and in the lineup. I don't think the Guardians are a great team. I think they're a decent team. I think they could potentially win into the mid-80s, and that might be enough in this division. The Twins were the best last year. They went backwards. My man Jason Lloyd likes the Tigers more than me, but they finished ahead of the Guardians last year. The Royals are better, but probably still under 500. The White Sox stink. They should finish in last. The Guardians' regular season opener, of course, is in that terrible, terrible stadium in Oakland. They open the season. So the first game of the year, 3 weeks from today, if you want to watch the Guardians, you got to stay up very late. A 10:07 Eastern time start. That stinks. That stinks if you play in the Eastern time zone to have to open on the West Coast. I feel like it's happened a bunch. The Guardians' first 10 games are on the road. First 7 on the West Coast. They have 4 games starting at 9:40 p.m. or later, and then 3 afternoon games, 2 in Oakland and 1 in Seattle. Then they go to Minnesota, and then, of course, the home opener Monday, April the 8th. Game usually they play at 4 o'clock. The Eclipse is supposed to hit like 3:40 something. They move the game back from what they normally have the home opener. Everybody's going to be into the Eclipse, and then you be at the game, and there you go. And the Browns have their first homestand is against the White Sox, and then they play the Yankees, which is always fun when the Yankees come to town. And then they got 7 games against Boston in 10 days with Oakland in between. Tough schedule early. Although I don't think Boston's going to be any good, but you got Houston early, you got the Braves early. You play everybody now. That's baseball. I can't get worked up on the schedule. All right, thanks to everybody for joining me on the show today. Thanks to everybody who was watching and listening. Spread the word about the new 2 o'clock start time. Thanks to Max and Monzo for producing. I'll take one last look at the chat room. Make sure there was not a last-second question here. Okay. Are you still looking for fantasy football players? Sorry, Duntavius. No. I was never looking for fantasy football players. I had put a post about a month or 2 ago looking for fantasy baseball people. That's done too. But thanks, everybody, for joining us in the chat. We'll talk to you next time. Where else but right here in the bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers. See you, everybody.